There is too much chaos out there. There are too many other things that can move us, too many circumstances that become obstacles for us to ever really truly set our sights on something that we cannot 100% affect. The fourth rule for life, according to Dr. Peterson, can be summed up under the title envy and how to avoid it. It simply states, compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. This can be seen as a kind of goal-setting opportunity. If we set benchmarks that are impossible, we will fail. And if we constantly set benchmarks that are impossible, we'll fail constantly and become depressed. If you're living in a small one-bed apartment and have an average income job and can barely afford bus fare, how are you going to transform that life to having the 2 cars, the boat, and the big house? And if you set that as your goal, you'll nearly always be defeated. And that can lead to that spiral of decline, both mentally and spiritually. So compare yourself to you. Don't compare yourself to others. See whether or not you have made progress from day to day, would seem to be a better benchmark for the individual rather than trying to compete in one way or another with some mythical creature. This is particularly important in Catholic circles where we read the lives of the saints and we are told to emulate them. But how possible is that? The more lives of the saints we read, the more impossible it seems sometimes, the more difficult and challenging. These people were given specific graces, were put through particular torments to be perfected. None of that's happening to me. How can I possibly live up to that standard? That's very common in the people I speak to. Oh, Father, the Blessed Mother had all of these massive advantages. How can I possibly live up to her unique, graceful state of life? Compare yourself to who you were yesterday and you will make progress. It's good that we all have a target. It's good that we all have ambition, particularly in the spiritual life. As St. Thomas says, you must aim high in order to allow the trajectory of the arrow to correct itself and at least come approximately to hitting the target. But if we can compare ourselves to ourselves on a daily basis, we are actually taking control of our lives. There is too much chaos out there. There are too many other things that can move us, too many circumstances that become obstacles for us to ever really truly set our sights on something that we cannot 100% affect. That's even in the natural level. For everything else in the supernatural level, we rely on God to take care of those obstacles. But we must first take care of ourselves. And so I think, again, this all falls within the Catholic understanding of the conscience, which needs to be examined on a daily basis. As we go to bed that night, we should look back upon the day and critically analyze. Not just yeah, or I did this, and this, and I'm sorry. But to critically look at why. What was the motivation that made us do these things, whether good or bad? And can, if it has been good, can it be recreated the next day and or even better perfected? And so that examination of conscience, that critical self-appraisal, who was I today? Was I good? Did I fail in my duties in some way? And if so, what made me fail? And am I truly responsible for that failure? Or was it circumstantial? Was it outside of my control? That seems to be what Dr. Peterson is trying to do, because that brings equilibrium. It brings back reality from the outside world back into our own psyche and our own consciousness and back into our own conscience. We cease to take responsibility for the things that we cannot change. and we only concentrate on the things that we can. And then that next morning, when we jump out of bed and stand tall in the presence of our God and humble ourselves in our posture of kneeling, we then ask the question, for all the good that I did yesterday, let me do the same today and perfect this particular aspect of it. If there were particular challenges the other day, do they still exist or have they gone away? Has sleep knitted up the ravelled sleep of care sufficiently for us to go boldly into the new world? And in doing so, do we carry Christ with us? Do we understand that this day will be better than the next day precisely because it is the next day? One step closer to perfection, one step closer to the imitation of Christ. Another opportunity to practice charity. And so those first 4 rules draw us closer towards a better understanding of self. We put ourselves out there. We project our image by standing tall or kneeling tall in the presence of our God and man. And we try to treat ourselves as someone who is responsible for doing good in the world. And in order that we don't get misled by our own sense of propaganda and by our own sense of ego, we test that theory by having friends who are rooted in the best of us, who want only to see the best perfection of us. And then we compare ourselves with ourselves day by day, challenging ourselves constantly in the perfection both of the natural order and the supernatural order.